we should move though to Tom Swift, who I have the flowers ready for the grave. Like the mentally, I don't actually have flowers, y'all. But and I wish we didn't have to lay them, because if we're going to talk about one of the shows on the CW that had the most potential, I think it would be Tom Swift. It is not as tight as its parent show, Nancy Drew, but that's like okay. One, they had 10 episodes, and two, they're doing something a little different, and so they were ironing out the kinks. And in the finale, I don't know about you guys, but it felt more like a penultimate episode than it did a finale until we got to the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. The last like act felt very like series finale, but the rest of it wasn't giving that.
Yeah, the first half of the episode was definitely one of those like standalone, like I don't want to say battle episodes, but when people are like locked in the same place, they have to sort something out. And I know the pressure was on Tom, and I know it was a tense episode. I agree with the analogy that it very much felt like a penultimate episode. It succeeded in not being mistakes without a doubt, but it just, because they spent so long in the same place, it didn't quite scream finale until they got out of the building.
And then now we're left with a lot of questions. I mean, I guess I should talk about more. We should talk more about the community building that they did. Once everyone working together to figure out what was happening was cool. One of the things, though, I felt Tom underestimated. Her name has escaped me, but Miss Big Bad. He underestimated Miss Big Bad like the whole time, and that confused me a little bit because like she seems like she's 15 steps ahead all the time, and she was really dastardly this episode. I mean, they're from poison handles to poisoning the food to trying to get people PTSD through the Swift site. I mean, it was horrifying.
Yeah, and once again, people were questioning Tom's integrity, and he even had to say, "I would not do this." And like, it sucks that he's had his like integrity questioned. I feel like for most of the episodes, but like I know he's selfish, but like he wouldn't have done something like that. And I'm glad that he like spoke up and defended himself.
Well, yeah, I wanted that man who was like, "You did this." I was like, "Sit down." In what way? like, how? He's never done. It'd be different if like Tom had a slight history of experimenting on people and they didn't know, like without consent or something. But that was not the case. So to assume that this man would poison everybody at this engineering complex, and Tom would have to stand up there and be like, "I would not do this. I would not do this to our people. Why would I poison y'all? Anyway, we need to work together." Like, and then I did like that everyone did work together, and they figured out everything within 15. No, I guess in their time it probably be like 15 minutes. For us, it was like 2 minutes. But it was great that they there was an urgency there, because it was funny when he was mixing the cobalt with Lino, and he took the time to tell Lino exactly what steps he was taking. And I was like, "Sir, there are people throwing up and driving on the floor. I think we can wait for Lino's science lesson today."
Yeah, the scenery was rallying. Everyone was really, really good. I know the show had to do an awful lot of relying on dialogue, because that's just how they get the information across. But I did like the scenery rallied everyone, because we've never questioned his integrity as a good person, but he has had his flaws. And I think that was like a public space for him to showcase that in spite of his flaws, he's still good at heart. And I think that message really came across. And there are a lot of stuff we can take away from this as a series finale, even though half of it didn't feel like one. But that was an important point for I think that was an important point for what now we know was the final episode of the series to get across. And it was an incredible moment. I'm completely on board with it. I really, really liked that moment, even if some of the getting there wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
I think what I really liked about this episode was the intent behind a lot of the scenes. Of course, we had to get the reveal about Lorraine and her figuring out that Claire has been mind controlling her. But one thing that Lorraine wanted from Tom the entire season was for him to step up. And in this episode, he truly did step up in the way that she wanted. I will say that there was one step up I didn't quite like of how it was seeded into the story, just because of all of there's so many high stakes in the finale. I did like the nuance behind the Grace and Mercy conversation. I did have an issue with how it's put into the storyline, considering what we had just learned in the previous episode.
Yeah, it's really complicated, right? Like that's the moment of the episode that sticks with me the most because I've thought about it the most, and we've had some time removed from it so that I can kind of like wrap my head around it more, because in the moment I was not thrilled with it. I wasn't happy with it. I didn't appreciate the language and the messaging completely. But once I like took a step back and metabolized that, okay, this is the creator of the series wrote this in for a reason. He experienced this in his own life. So I have to have empathy for that. Like I completely get it. But like these conversations are some that, you know, a lot of people unfortunately have had in their own lives, in their own journeys. And I think it gets into tricky territory when we have a show kind of telling young people um that it's important to like forgive people a little bit, like to give them grace even though you feel like they don't deserve it. And that's what his mom says, is that you give people grace who then they don't deserve that. It's for yourself, or whatever she was saying. That was there, it was a sweet intent behind it as his mother, but it's a big ask for me to see that and to have that put on to the viewers, as much of importance as it holds for Tom. Like that's part of his story, right? Is to come to terms with what he's experienced with his father, not just for his father, not just for his mother, but to find that peace within himself. And that scene, I can look on it now and have a different perspective on it, but in the moment I was like, I don't know what to do with this. There was just it's so heavy, and there's many different readings on it, which I guess is the mark of successful storytelling, when no matter what the feeling is, you make somebody feel something. And for that reason, I really do love that scene, because it made me really stop and think and reflect on my own experiences. So that's how I've come full circle with that scene.
I think that had we had more distance between that moment and when Tom had found out about the conversion therapy gummies, it might have been better. I know they only had 10 episodes. But the other thing was, I wish it feels like a conversation that doesn't have the context of those gummies, even though it does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It just feels like that would be a conversation that she was having about his father's homophobia when he got home, about like if his father still isn't like, you want me to be gracious, but he's not being gracious. Instead, we have it in a high stakes environment. So it's like it's carrying a lot of weight in the story. I mean, and that was the point. So I do wrestle with it about like what it's saying, how it's saying it, the fairness in a conversation like that. I do believe it's supposed to be unfair. Because what is the line? It's grace is something you give someone that they don't deserve, and mercy is what you give, is what you saving them from what they do deserve. So in some ways, she is implying that Barton does deserve to get left up at Saturn, but I don't want you to do that. And they do have, there's the apology from Barton, which I wish was an "I love you" instead of an apology, but we got an apology. And it was a good apology for the time that we had. I just wish there's so much more I wanted from Barton and Tom's relationship exploration that we just didn't quite get because of time, and because we had to do all the storylines about the pieces. So there is that. Oh, Tom Swift is like, it's fun, but it's heavy. Like it's just
Yeah.
And
it's like
just
all this like science stuff, and then it's like, wait a minute, we're gonna like make you reflect on your own childhood trauma. And I'm like, sweet.
And it definitely did feel like timing was an issue there, because I do agree that felt like more of a general conversation between Tom and his mom, and it would have been easier to buy if that was a general conversation about Barton. But literally the end of the previous episode revealed what he'd done And then in the first half to middle of this episode, suddenly Tom was supposed to be all right with it. And I know then we got to the whole forgiveness thing at the end. But again, I think you said, Sabrina, that having high stakes is usually a good thing, but it kind of undercut the emotion of the story, because of course Tom was going to make that decision because he was a good person, but because of both timing and the high stakes of the situation, it felt like he was, I don't want to say manipulated, but talked into making a decision that he wasn't ready to make.
Yeah, guilt felt very
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be honest with our listeners. I did not watch episode 9 after we talked about it. I just didn't watch it. So I know about the situation, obviously, from what we talked about, but I don't have that context going into it. And I felt like I didn't need it because regardless of the events of episode 9 and what we learned, to me, still, in my opinion, the apology and forgiveness from Barton was premature, in my opinion. I'll keep saying in my opinion. But I know, like, time constraints. They had 10 episodes. They needed to tell a complete story because who knows if they got a season 2. And I'm sure they would have like undid some things and unpacked it more if they got more seasons. But just in that moment when he's talking to his father at the end and they have their exchange, I kind of wanted Tom to express that he was doing it for himself. Like he needed to hear that and accept it to free himself. And I didn't get that. It felt like he was doing it for everybody else other than himself. And I worry about the character and what he's still feeling. It just felt kind of secondary when I wanted it to be at the top.
Because it became about Barton and what
And I don't
Barton
care about
needed.
Barton, as we established last week.
Yes. Well, also because I might retract my statement about Barton's apology. Because one thing I did notice, his apology was about Tom trying to change Tom into what he believes a man is supposed to be. But at the same time, he says that you are the man who can save me. I was like, oh, this is why I want to die. I love you. Because at the end of what you're saying is, he's the only one who can get you down, but get you back to earth. And as emotional as that moment is between the two of them, I was like, you still made it about yourself, sir. You still made it about the fact that your son is the only person who can bring you back to earth. And perhaps acknowledging that was the road forward for Barton, especially with all the reflection he had to do. I was like, just say I love you to your son. And then maybe that would have been something they would have worked through in a season 2, potentially. I mean, there was the ending part about how Barton's not actually coming back to Earth until 2096, which like, well, my brain went boop, like right after Rowan revealed that. And so there is that, but like I am going to assume, because of how much time they spent on Tom really unpacking his feelings about his dad, even if we didn't get Barton unpacking his feelings about his son, that they would have continued doing that in season 2 had they been greenlit for 1.
Yeah, it feels like, again, timing was just basically what was undercut the importance of that scene, because that wasn't their intention, but it kind of felt like the way it came across was that Barton had almost telegraphed the fact that Tom would find this out, so told him what he wanted to hear. I know that wasn't necessarily their intention, but it just came across like there were a lot of words said, a lot of words that would have ticked boxes of what Tom needed to hear, and in the end it got the result he wanted. I know that wasn't the writer's intention, but I just think, as you said, everything came too close together. It just felt like, go get that out of the way, deal with that. I just think, was Reed said that it needed more emotional unpacking so that we could learn it was more about what Tom needed rather than what Barton needed. And again, I just think they had to write themselves into a corner there because they had no time, because obviously you had the huge cliffhanger and unfortunately no season 2 after that.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away because I know the creator also said that he was really proud to be telling a story where the parent is apologizing to the child. I'm going to paraphrase because I don't know exactly what he said, but it was in that area. And I think that is really important to show on television. In my own feeling, in my own opinion, I'll keep prefacing everything I say with that. I love seeing that, but an apology doesn't always need to be accepted for it to be impactful in a story. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But can we circle back to the ending? Because I think that's a really important part of the episode too, is finding out the big twist at the end. and I'm gonna double down on my statement from past episodes that a cliffhanger ending is a serve. I'm sorry, guys. I loved it. I loved it. Because it's going to ensure that this show is going to be on every like gone too soon list for the next 10 years. Like it's just, I don't want to see the story wrapped up, even though they kind of tried to do that. But with that last, like, we're not done yet, I was like, yeah, that's yes.
It makes you want to rewatch too, to see like what parts of the series were they really hinting at Rowan being from the future. For me, it was the flashback sequence when he's running in all that gray and tattered clothing, because at least on the CW and other, I guess, sci-fi productions too, they love putting you in something tattered and gray and washed out. And so that's what was going on with him. Then the storyline with the incredibly like genius woman who I forget what she was inventing, but with the baby who he knew and was like seemed to be part of his family. She didn't know him. And so I was like, oh, so who is the baby to you now? Since we know that you're from the future, like, is that an uncle? Is it your mama? Like who, your grandmother? Like, who is this baby to you? Who is this family to you? Like, there's so many things to unpack with Rowan now, and to see like where he might have been giving it away just a little bit, that he was from the future.
I'm excited. Like, I know that I think I've had a really complicated time watching this show, which is at no fault of the show. Again, like a mark of a really successful show, but it's not going to be the end of my journey. I want to rewatch it and to like pick up on all the things. And like, now that I know what happens, like I can have a fresh set of eyes and just watch everything and really like have a new outlook on it. But I have to say, I think this ending is really good. It doesn't feel like, it feels like a semicolon. Like, it feels like this is a really good ending to this story, and it could continue, but we don't necessarily need it to continue, because there's still, from this moment, to go back and see how this plays into the story is a whole another thing all in and of itself. Like, we don't really necessarily need season 2 as much as we want it to understand how we got to this ending, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm just trying to like rationalize like the ending.
No, it is, you're right about cliffhangers being a service. This is one of the best cliffhangers that did not make me angry. Like, it didn't make me feel like they just cut the show. Like, I do feel
wasted my time. I didn't feel like I wasted my time.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's a cliffhanger that works for Tom's story. And like, it tells you that there's more story beyond this. And I would love to see that story, but they told a complete enough story where I don't feel cheated.
Yeah. There's no like huge question. Like, we're not like, did this person die? Even though there's that kind of a question, but it's not an important one. It's not like Tom got shot and we're like, oh, we don't know if he lived or died. It's a cliffhanger that is juicy, but is like, it's a complete sentence. So
yeah,
that's my take.
No, it'll definitely benefit, I think, a rewatch or enhance a rewatch, because it felt to me like an ending, like, oh, the first thing I wanted to do was talk to you guys about it. And it wasn't oh, that's it then. It was what does this mean for the show? It definitely, it didn't leave me in the same way that, like I said, the Legends of Tomorrow cliffhanger did, isn't like all that for nothing. I feel like this definitely would impact the story, and it would, as you said, you could find more story in a rewatch of season 1. And like, this show was so extravagant and like so extra, and it thrived for being that, and yet it still caught me off guard with that ending. We know like this show, it has a technological answer for everything. It also exists in the same supernatural universe as Nancy Drew, and yet time travel now. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Coming.
That's so exciting. Oh, and they didn't leave us, like, I'm glad that we know that Berkeley can be saved.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that like he's gonna be okay. I did find it funny that they really had Tom like, I might keep my dad up there to keep like Barclay around.
I was like, oh, Tom.
That conversation with his mom. Like, if he was like, so Mom, I chose Barclay. And that's just going to circle Saturn until he runs out of gas.
I mean, who's been there for him?
Right.
Yes, exactly.
That robot.
And I don't really care if Eskel's alive or dead. Like, sir, if you're on a Cayman Island, fine. If you're at the bottom of whatever lake is around here, fine
I
too.
know that was very much like, sorry that happened, or I'm happy for you. Either way, I don't like. God bless you on your journey.
Yes, but if there's one thing I would like them to continue on, if they could do it in like the universe, it would be if they somehow seeded what was going on with Lino into a Nancy Drew episode, so that storyline is complete.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, that's one of the stories that never really got to breathe. So it would be cool if, again, Nancy's so supernatural, but I feel like there's room for technology in there and like superpowers as well. So that would be cool if they managed to see that in somehow.